This is the Board of Education meeting for Community Consolidated School District 46 for Wednesday, August 10th, 2022 here at Frederick School. We are in our new shingdings here in the Falcon Room. It's a very nice room that has been put together for teacher training and for the board meetings. So first I need is a call to order and a roll call, please.
Weedman.
Here.
Mack.
Here.
Albert.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
And Miller.
Here.
That gives us a quorum, so if we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody's looking. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so next I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda, including the personnel addendum that we received earlier tonight.
So moved.
I'll second.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
And LaCroix.
Aye.
Next, we are up to public comments. Anybody signed up there? Mr. Adam? Okay.
None.
Next, we have the presentation of the Equity Audit Report.
All right, so I'm very pleased to introduce you to Yvette Dubiel, Dr. Dubiel, who's going to be presenting our Equity Audit Report to us. Dr. Dubiel is joining us remotely tonight as she's traveling. So, board, you can see her there, and audience, you can see her there. So, in between two of these, and in fact, do we need to make a little space, or can you see them okay? Can you see the board okay? Just so you all know, once we get our new technology set up in this room, we will have a board there, we'll have one right there, and we'll have one over here as well. So lots of spaces for people to see. Tonight we're kind of making do. All right, Dr. Dubiel, we're handing it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay? I can't see you, so if you could give me verbal confirmation.
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So tonight I will provide to you an overview of the equity audit, the process, the timeline, and the overview of the findings. It in no way is in lieu of the equity audit report, which provides a much more comprehensive and detailed background to the results of the equity audit. This presentation provides that overview, a complement, if you will, to the report. There will be a few things that will specifically cover the process itself, the quantitative and qualitative aspects of the audit, the findings, and next steps. So first, the equity audit in itself has 5 phases to it, and typically it's a 9 to 12-month process. Prior to a district or organization, it's not exclusive to the institution of education, that pursue an equity audit or an equity assessment, they need to develop a team. And this team is critical because they provide direction and guidance for the audit. So the district assembles a team, also known as a District Equity Leadership Team, DELT for short, because again, they're providing some structure to the equity audit process. During phase 1, we meet with that team, and there are 3 significant tasks that need to be accomplished with that team that I will go over before we can move forward with any part of the equity audit. But before going forward, I'd like to thank those members of the District Equity Leadership Team that were selected or volunteered. So thank you folks for being a part of it. You are instrumental in making sure that it is comprehensive. Once the team is selected, what they do during that phase 1 is they complete an equity needs assessment. The results of that needs assessment, as you are aware, are in the report. And the reason for that assessment is for those that are closest to the district or organization, provide some insight on how they feel they are doing in terms of equity. The assessment offers 10 different components with an associated rubric where the team divides into small groups and decides where they feel they are at in accordance with the rubric. They provide a justification for their rating and suggestions for improvement. Again, that's an important part of the equity audit process. And because we utilize a triangulation of data, basically a multitude of data sets to drive findings, that needs assessment does serve as one of those data sets that can help us derive or lead to a finding. So that's the first part of what is completed during phase one. There are two additional things that occurred during phase one with the district equity leadership team. The second is identifying the data. The team receives about a menu of 30 different data sets that are collected, that they believe should be collected and included as part of the equity audit. And we'll talk about those data sets. They have a really great conversation about multiple year data so we can identify trends, different types of data that we can disaggregate by different identities. Again, I'll speak to that a little bit further. And also provide insight about additional data that may not be encapsulated in that menu of 30 different sets of data. The final thing that is completed with the district equity leadership team during phase one is the qualitative aspect. And that is what questions we will ask the focus groups. And it's not just the questions of the focus groups, but the structures. So typically districts have 3 different stakeholders that we can ask for participation in focus groups. Those stakeholders are students, staff, and parents, guardians / caretakers. So the team receives, first of all, a bank of questions that can be asked of each of those, and they're not limited to those questions. They have really great conversation and decide what is it that they really want to solicit from these stakeholders. And we conduct the focus groups completely independent of the district. So they have great dialogue about that. They're also given structure during phase one about how many questions should be asked in the brief and always limited time that we have for participants in the focus group. They also determine the structure, meaning how many of those focus groups will be dedicated to students, how many will be dedicated to staff, etc. In the next few slides, I will break up for you what that looked like and how the team, what the actual result was of the different stakeholders and the structures of those. But basically, they decide what that is. And then from there, after phase one is complete, phase two and phase three of the audit occurs simultaneously. Phase two is where the district now gathers all that data that was agreed upon during phase one. So in other words, they have their marching order, and that takes several months to do because it's quite a bit of data. The data that is collected can range greatly from 3 to 5 years worth of data on demographics, on academic programming, on student discipline, academic progress like grades, benchmark assessments, standardized assessments, absenteeism, tardiness, number of languages, staff, and board demographics. And it's not just a collection of this data in just numbers, but even microscopically disaggregating that data by the identities that we need to submit to the state, such as race, ethnicity, gender, and special populations like English language learners, special education, and free and reduced lunch. Phase three of the equity audit, again, is occurring simultaneously while the district is busy collecting that data is the focus groups. The focus groups take place during that time, and it is with those 3 stakeholders, again, students, staff, and community. Now, as far as how many focus groups are actually taking place will depend on the selection the district makes on the equity audit. So the equity audit, it includes several different packages, if you will, and they all have a different price point. So when organizations or districts are interested in pursuing an equity audit, it clearly states how many focus groups that will include. But your district selected the package that includes 18 focus groups. Of those 18 focus groups, it is the district equity leadership team, again, during phase 1, they have a conversation. Of those 18, how many should we dedicate to student focus groups? So multiple student focus groups, multiple staff focus groups, and multiple family groups. They decided to be even across the board, and there were 6 focus groups taken of each of those stakeholders, and you can see the number of participants and the total number. A question that is often asked is if there's some magical number or if there's some threshold of participation. It would be great if everyone could participate. First, you're going to be limited, and that's a reality because there's going to be cost and time structures and barriers to be within. But considering the size of your district and doing this for a long time, this is a very impressive number of participants. Sometimes we organize focus groups and not everyone shows up. We had a good representation from each of the stakeholders that actively participated in the focus group, so I'm very thankful for that. Then phase 4 and phase 5 occurs. So after the quantitative data is collected and synthesized and then submitted to us for analysis and the focus groups are completed, then we do our really robust work. I have a team of people that spend collectively from the beginning of the equity audit to when we end. Typically, collectively, it takes over 500 hours. So all of the equity audit process, again, from before we begin, so a little bit before phase 1 until the end, we've got 500 hours committed by 4 individuals that spend time on each of the equity audits. So we do analyze the quantitative and qualitative data sets to reach a finding. A couple of things about reaching a finding. We do not have to rely on both quantitative and qualitative evidence to reach a finding. In other words, we could solely rely on quantitative data to reach a finding, or we could solely rely on qualitative data. Sometimes we have both. So there are instances perhaps that are occurring in the schoolhouse that may not be documented in any quantitative fashion, but it is perhaps occurring on a regular, semi-regular basis in the schoolhouse, and that was brought to our attention during the focus group. That will absolutely lead to an equity audit, an equity finding. And then there are things that occur or data that emerges from the quantitative analysis that could be something that needs attention, but nobody actually said it during the focus group. It could also lead to an equity audit finding. Something that's really also important to say, equity audits in general, and the research is very clear, will be limited. Equity audits are always going to be limited to the time that you have. So for example, if you do an equity audit in 5 years from today and 10 years from today, it's going to look different. Because we're limited on the time, we also have a limit of scope and sequence. So the equity audit can never be designed to encapsulate every nuance of an area of attention, an area of needed improvement when it comes to equity. It is not designed to be exhaustive. It is designed to spotlight some significant issues or significant topics or significant areas of concern that could be addressed systemically, but it's not designed as this is the only topic or issue or concern we should address. After phase 4, where all the quantitative data is analyzed and a report is documented, a draft report, so there's a kind of an in-between phase between phase 4 and 5, a draft report is sent to the district. The purpose of the draft report is for leadership, a small group of leadership, to read the report, make sure the data is correct, make sure names are correct. They cannot change any of the findings, even if they disagree. The purpose of that is to make sure that everything looks good before we finalize it and send the digital version to the district for their discretion for their permanent record keeping. So they do that as a process, and they give really great feedback. And then phase 5 is where we clear that up with the findings, and then that's it. Then the actual contract, if you will, the actual equity audit process ceases. And then we'll talk about what's next in a moment. But first, what did the equity audit actually find? So something that's really critical to recognize is the research is very clear, knowing that educational institutions tend to be some of the most complex institutions that exist. It will consistently be challenging, and this is not exclusive to the field of education, but especially in the field of education, it will be consistently difficult and challenging to ensure that we're constantly moving that equity needle forward in so many pillars or cores or strands or whatever we want to call it that impact school, that impact academic, that impact all students. So what we have developed is a framework. The framework, this is an accountability framework. What the accountability framework is designed to do is help districts organize different ways they could be very purposeful when it comes to equity. So they're thinking about that systems lens. Systems has to do with anything systems related, everything from our registration process to our student handbook, our board policies to our dress code, our school improvement plan to our hiring practices. So there'll be findings in the report that fall under systems. Teaching and learning has to do with curriculum, instructional pedagogy and practices, upgrades, formative and summative assessments, instructional programs, again, like English language learners, special education, that would fall under teaching and learning. So there's recommendations under that. Student voice, climate culture would include discipline, extracurricular, SCL, trauma-informed practices. That would fall under there. Professional learning or professional development would fall under PD, that is equity specific for staff. And then family and community as agency is ensuring that we're tapping into our community members, our caregivers to help support all students. So when an equity audit has, for example, 15 findings, well, those 15 findings will be organized using this accountability framework. So there'll be a few findings under systems, a few findings under teaching and learning, etc. And what we know is each of these 5, we call them the strands, also known as the 5 strands of systemic equity. Each of these strands are critical. Each of these strands require attention when thinking about equity. So the findings that I have for you, and I'm going to go over in the next few slides, they are organized under this. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. There's going to be perhaps things that didn't come up, as we're going to be limited by the quantitative and qualitative data in front of us, even utilizing the triangulation of data, which again is that needs assessment. All right, so under systems findings, there were 3 particular findings that absolutely emerged. And that's 1, developing some clear language around equity and effectively communicating it to all stakeholders, knowing that there has been some really great history on the part of the district to really establish some common language, continue to do that, maybe even consider some different terminology that often comes up related to equity, and making sure we really are communicating, we're really clear on that language. 2 will work out great because we're going to talk about what's going to happen, but goals. Oftentimes, the rightful unknown is what's next. How do we develop measurable, transparent, intentional, and accountable goals related to equity? Well, you need that, and we're going to talk about what that's going to look like. So that's absolutely critical, and that's one of those, that 1.2 is a finding that pretty what we call boilerplate, because it's something that all organizations need. Even if they do not pursue an equity audit, it is important that there's some type of plan, a robust plan, and ideally on a robust plan that is organizational. In this case, district-wide is key. So we'll talk about that EAP, the Equity Action Plan, soon, and how it will incorporate the same accountability framework. So it'll be aligned really nicely. And then 1.3 is increasing employment recruitment efforts to attract highly qualified, racially diverse, and or male teachers and administrators, looking at the multiple year of data that was of staff and seeing that the trend is really consistent and not necessarily aligned with the demographic of students or what could be the projection of students. As you have saw in the report, the national projection of the diversity of students, exploring ways to increase employment recruitment efforts. Now, again, this may not be necessarily news to you, but it is clear in the equity audit that this is something that needs attention. Again, not there are some recommendations, but the recommendations in the report, you're not limited to those recommendations. So something that'll come out next is how we prioritize these findings and how we develop solutions that make sense for us. Under teaching and learning, there were 3 findings that also evolved. Embed opportunities for culturally responsive pedagogy and practices in all curriculum. This is a heavy, heavy lift. 2.1 is one of those findings that is going to take multiple years. There's multiple contents and multiple grade. What does that even look like, culturally responsive pedagogy and practices? When could it be age and grade appropriate? When does it absolutely embed, or more importantly, infuse in work? We're not asking teachers to add anything to their plate, but it's actually very organic and making sure that the content is engaging for students, making sure that the students connect with the learning. The research is very clear. When students connect with the learning through their interests, when it connects to them, to their background, their perspectives, their experiences, they're much more engaged for the learning ahead. 2.2 is analyze the root causes of academic disparities among Black / African American and Hispanic Latinx students. So in the data sets that was provided, there is some concern about looking at some of those benchmarks and looking at some of those assessments, and how when we disaggregate it by race, there's an area that needs attention. Now, this does not necessarily mean that there is an area of concern, but based on the evidence provided and the trend that we see, we need to analyze the root causes. We need to explore that further. 2.3, explore the access and opportunities to advanced math programming, which is offered at your district in the 8th grade among Black African American students, Hispanic Latinx students, and special populations. So again, based on the quantitative data received, the multiple year of data, these particular students seem to have fewer access for that exposure to advanced math programming. So there's different things that will come up in solution and different ways we can enhance those opportunities so students see themselves in the opportunity to also thrive in those type of courses. So we are intentional in the recruitment so we can scaffold the learning, so we can support the teachers who teach this content. There are multitude of opportunities to explore, and we want to explore. Maybe there isn't an issue of access for these particular demographic of students. But again, based on the data and the trend and the multiple year data, it is something that needs attention to. So if we find, as we go further and we go through the process, that absolutely we agree that there is an area of concern, let's decide what can we do to leverage that access so all students, especially those historically marginalized, historically excluded, can have access to thrive in a rigorous math course. Okay. Student voice, climate, and culture strand, there was one finding under that, and that's establish a student equity advisory committee. As you're aware, in the equity audit and in the focus groups that was captured in the equity audit, students said things and shared experiences that could be and that are concerning. And what we know is we want to try to have something in place that is proactive so that these situations don't occur. So establishing a student equity advisory is key. Now, the makeup of that, the intrinsic details and the nuance of, well, who will be a part of it and how often that meet, that will come naturally through the collection of the district equity leadership team during the equity action plan. Basically, when there are student equity advisory committees, it will vary from district to district based on the structure of the district, on the levels, on the grade levels of the students, what is their purpose. Once that is established, though, we do go through the important task of identifying some norms and some agreements, some outcomes of what we hope to get out of a student equity advisory team. But really, more importantly, it's about providing students an opportunity to sit at the table and give us feedback about their learning experience. Do they feel cared for in their schoolhouse? Do they feel belonging? Is there perhaps bullying that is occurring? Are there issues of microaggressions that are occurring that adults may not know about? Is there something we can do? And so rather than a situation occurring and students being reactive, and frankly, they're not always sharing when a situation does occur, a student equity advisory committee allows us to be proactive and take a pulse from the students and to check how we're doing. And again, the The details of how that looks like will come from the work of the Equity Action Plan. The fourth recommendation under the professional learning strand is providing training opportunities and educational equity. The tenets or paradigms related to equity are infinite, from what is equity? Right? We need to have an equity 101 sometimes. What is it? Because it can be often misconstrued. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So what it is and what it is not needs to be explored. Well, what is culturally responsive pedagogy? What does this mean? How is this going to impact my students' learning? Will all students be impacted? Will students feel bad about who they are? Absolutely not. This is the learning that we need to provide for staff. It can be impactful for the adults who are in front of students all the time. So PD, or professional development, so sorry, acronyms. So professional development, or PD, on equity, what it is not, how we can enhance already different pedagogy and practices to ensure that all students can interact and engage with the learning beforehand. So a whole lot of front loading. And then as well as particular paradigms related to educational equity, like implicit bias. Well, what is that? We know the term microaggressions. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to feel truly belong and included in the schoolhouse? So PD is one of those strands, one of those action items that will never end. Unequivocally, equity is about humanity, and we are in the human business. So understanding how we can support our most vulnerable population, students, not only in their academic learning, but in whole child, really places the responsibility on us as adults to ensure that we are up to date on the latest research and what it means to serve all students. And then finally, family and community as agency. Similar to the student voice recommendation, there's a recommendation to also establish a committee of community members, of families, parents, guardians, or caretakers on Equity Advisory Committee. Tapping into our community members, what can we do to ensure that you also feel included and welcome as a community member in the school? What are areas that we are improving on, and what are areas to think about? So rather than be reactive, have a regular or semi-regular opportunity of a standing committee where we are proactive in the conversation and proactive in possible action steps. All right, so what does this mean? Now that the equity audit is done and we have some recommendations, again, forgive me for repeating myself, that's not an exhaustive list of recommendations. There are plenty of things that perhaps you may think about or others may think about, but it just didn't emerge from the equity audit. That's where the next step is actually really important. This is the Equity Action Plan. And in the theme of acronyms, I'm going to refer to it as the EAP. So what is the EAP? So now that the audit is done, we will reconvene that district equity leadership team. We only met with them one time during phase one when they provided that guidance and structure of the equity audit process. So when we reconvene the district equity leadership team, we talk about the equity audit. There may be some new folks in the space, and we remind them about the process and what it entailed. And then we share the findings and we ask them, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What was missed? Then we go through the really important task of developing a plan, an EAP. When district committees develop a plan, it's very structured as to how many days we will get together and how many who can be a part of it. But what's going to happen, now who could be a part of it, but who should be a part of it? What's going to happen is this district equity leadership team, there's typically anywhere from 20, 30 people on it, will divide into 5 smaller groups. And those 5 smaller groups will be based on that accountability framework. So the district equity leadership team, there'll be some folks sitting on the systems strand, some folks sitting on the teaching and learning, some on the student voice, climate, and culture, etc. And then they'll be responsible for developing action items that either adhere to the equity audit, or they have thought of some additional items that can advance equity within their respective strand. Now, what comes out of that in developing the EAP, so they get a very structured template, almost like a SMART plan, but it's much more comprehensive. They get a very, that extensive template. But what comes out of that is oftentimes we have groups that develop and are really not creative, but I should say passionate about how we can mitigate inequities, how we can address issues of opportunity gap and access gap of our students. And they can come up with many, many ideas. We can have 100 ideas, and they're all valid and they're all important. We're not going to be able to do them all. So part of the work with the district equity leadership team is prioritizing some of those equity audits and prioritizing other ideas that they may have. So there's a structure in place to do that. And it also helps for the district equity leadership team to know that the plan they are designing is for a 1-year rollout. So our team, or your district team, will be meeting this fall to develop that EAP. And the rollout is to occur as soon as January. So it will occur during the school year. And I believe it's going to be an 18-month rollout. So there'll be some things that will be perhaps happening rather quickly in research-wise for the fall, but they'll be gathering during the fall to do that. So January 1st of 2023, it'll kick off, and the EAP, I believe, is going to be 18 months. So it'll be for the rest of 23 school year, and then 23-24. So that's what the team is developing. They're going to commit to action plans that are systems related, teaching and learning, etc. And so again, that team is important to not only develop the plan, but they're also going to be responsible. They're also going to be accountable to the rollout of some of those action items. One of the things that's often challenging in developing a plan is teams can come together, come up with great ideas. They're all so worthy of attention, but it's for somebody else to do. And an equity action plan is those people who are there, it is for them to do. They are committing to that work. And that's sometimes a reality check of what we can accomplish within that time. It should be no surprise to you when it comes to systemic pieces, systemic advancement, organizational change management, we tend to have 3 barriers: lack of time, the lack of personnel, and the lack of resources, like financial resources. So knowing that those barriers exist, what do we know we can still accomplish and be authentic when it comes to systems, when it comes to teaching and learning, student voice, climate, culture, professional development, and family community as agency? The team will be directed. They are required to come up with one actionable item, at least one in each of those strands, because each of those strands are equally important. All the details of what that's going to do, the timeline, who's going to be accountable, what type of resources it does need, that will come through the EAP process as we go through that. Whew. Okay, I think I'm done at this point. Happy to answer questions as best as possible.
Does anybody have any questions for her? Christy?
First of all, thank you so much for your work with all of the different aspects of this audit. I appreciated hearing more about them. I had a few questions. I'm going to skip 2 of them and ask you about kind of process speaking, and I want to preface this first. So I'm a fan of appreciative inquiry, of looking at, you're familiar with it, so looking at a situation and not repressing or ignoring a problem, but looking for the positive deviance, looking for the bright lights within that problem. So I'm wondering, in terms of equity, what does the data suggest about where social justice currently does reside in our district?
So with social justice, we're going to have to do a couple of things. We're going to have to define it for ourselves in district, but social justice tends to impact each of those strands. There's things regarding systems, for example, dress code. We know historically, and unfortunately in current times, dress code can be very sexist. They can be very exclusionary towards young girls. They could be pointing towards young girls as somehow inviting some unwanted attention. That's a social justice issue. We will have a conversation with the district equity leadership team to examine perhaps the dress code and examine it for a social justice lens. The same could be true of the teaching and learning, specifically when it comes to content. Is there an opportunity for project-based learning that evolves to a social justice project? So for example, if we're learning in science about the importance of the 3 R's, recycle, reduce, and I forgot the other R, we can have a social justice project where we're actually impacting our local community. So each of those strands has the capacity for a social justice lens, a social justice project, a social justice action that will absolutely reside on what the team decides they're going to develop.
Okay. Thank you for that. I love the ideas and the possibilities. I guess I'm looking historically. Have there been places where injustice has already been disrupted in our district? I guess I'm looking for more a view of the past and looking at what the data suggests about the presence of equity in our district now. Or did it not? And maybe that was not one of the foci of the.
Yeah, I really couldn't speak to extreme history. One of the things, and I think I did not mention this, that occurs during phase 4 and phase 5 of the equity audit is the district is encouraged to submit historical efforts, or what we call historical landscapes, to advance equity as a district. So that's also in the equity audit report. What has the district done, let's say in the last 3 to 5 years, to advance it, to advance equity, to advance social justice, to ensure we're an anti-bias organization, for instance. So that is encapsulated. I wouldn't assume that it's exhaustive, nor would I necessarily be privy to all that information. But you can make a correlation, not a cause. As you can imagine, I appreciate your inquiry knowledge. We can make a correlation that based on the trend of certain quantitative data, that there's a need of there's an area of injustice occurring. We can make a correlation based on qualitative data like microaggressions occurring in a school, that it may possibly be a culture and climate that is unwelcoming, that somehow inadvertently perpetuates bullying, for example. But until we examine, that would be limited from the equity audit. There would be correlations that could be made, but it wouldn't be very partial to make conclusions. The equity action plan, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the folks who are going to be developing that equity action plan, they'll be able to honor some of the historical work that's been done. The current work that's being done, leverage that with that equity lens, and then explore some ways that perhaps we've missed the mark.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the last question, I noticed that some of our students in the focus groups indicated that bullying is taking place on the buses and in private spaces that are not monitored by adults as closely. Just wondering if you have any recommendations for those, or if you could tell us if other schools have addressed that.
Unfortunately, we are seeing an uptick of microaggressions and bullying occurring with students at every level, elementary, middle, and high school across the country. I think there are multiple factors of why that is happening. It doesn't always happen in front of an adult, because most adults, hopefully, someday all adults will interject and will disrupt that microaggression, will disrupt that bullying. So students are clever and they don't want to get in trouble sometimes. And so that doesn't necessarily mean they won't do it. So they do occur in the hallways, in the restrooms, on the buses, when an adult is not present. There's no magical anything I could propose that will eliminate that, especially because what may be cultivated and supported at home may be in contrast to a caring community at school. But what we know, in addition to supporting adults to make sure that they are reactive in case those situations occur, as well as proactive, is making sure that we are modeling for our students, and we're repeating over and over again for our students that it will not be tolerated. And in the schoolhouse and when working with each other, we need to care for each other. We need to be mindful of the words that we use. And you will, the adults at school know this, and I'm sure they know this, and say it over and over and over again. And then really follow through with a consequence when it does not happen, when it does not occur.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I do have, not questions, but a few more pieces of information I want to share about moving forward, because Dr. Dubiel and I have spent a lot of time making our plans, actually along with Amy Gluck. So Dr. Dubiel has been talking about our district equity leadership team. We have already selected dates for that team to begin meeting, and we'll begin meeting in the middle of September. So we're really excited about that. When we talked about the creation of the EAP, we talked about the fact that it's typical for a school district to take a full year to create the EAP, and that the next year would be the actual, the doing, right? It's the doing, which is why, excuse me, Yvette first started talking about it being a one-year plan. But she also sensed in us some urgency because we're eager to get moving. You know, we've been talking about equity in our school district for a long time. We've had our Equity and Inclusion Committee in place for a long time. We've done different pieces of professional development for a long time, but we all want to get moving in the same direction. And the results, the findings of the equity audit are exactly what we're going to want to do. And so Dr. Dubiel said, well, there are times where a school district will kind of do all of their planning in 6 months, and then there's an 18-month plan. And we said, yes, sign us up. So that's why Yvette said we'll be ready to go in January. As it happens, as we worked on our schedule, our last meeting for creating the plan is actually in the middle of January. That just happened to be the way it was possible to set these meetings up. So we don't actually expect that we'll be ready to be displaying anything right away in January. Maybe we're talking about February, possibly March, but the point is we didn't want to wait until 23, 24 to get started. So I did want to share that with you. I also wanted to let you know that, of course, we're sitting here in a public meeting. This is a streamed meeting. This presentation will be able to be viewable by anyone. As well, all of the findings that Dr. Dubiel and her team put together for us will be on a document that will be viewable on our website as well. So I wanted to share that. Board, does anyone have any questions for me about our plans moving forward? All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dubiel. I know you're busy and traveling, so thank you very much for taking time out for us this evening. All right, and we wish you a great rest of your trip.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, next up are board reports. Does anybody have anything? Christy, I see you shaking your head. Okay.
But I don't want to, okay, yes. First of all, thank you to our teachers, our administrators, everyone involved in starting out the year. I know it's been a busy week so far and still more to do, I'm sure. Second thing is just the community cafe is scheduled for September 19th. It is focused on health and public education this year, and I wanted to thank Robin Erker from Grays Lake Rehab. She will be hosting us in her brand spanking new community room. We're especially grateful for that space because it's accessible to elders in our community and it's equipped for them. So we're hoping to draw some older people, wiser, experienced people into our midst. And then also I wanted to let you know that we have our first student member who's on that planning team. Her name is Maya Weiss, and she's a Park student, former Park student. She is currently a junior at Grays Lake Central High School. So she's going to join us and help us reach out to students who are interested in community resilience. And hopefully that will be an event that will draw a whole bunch of people together to talk about what we can do as a community to complement what everyone at the schools is already doing. So September 19th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Grays Lake Rehab.
I don't particularly. We'll have the next CEDAL governing board meeting is coming up near the end of August, I believe, so I'll have an update at the next board meeting. But I wanted to join Christy in thanking the staff, the faculty, everybody in the district for getting ready for school next week. I have some very excited maybe not so excited, students at home, but they will be excited when they get here. And just wanted to share my appreciation for all of that work that you're doing to get the school year ready to go. It's a lot, and I'm really appreciative to you for that.
Jason? Jessica?
So I also have a save the date to share, Saturday, September 24th. The Village of Grays Lake is participating in an Illinois solar education tour, and it will feature our local library and at least one of our local CCSD 46 schools powered by solar panels, likely Frederick or GMS. And the bike tour may also feature homes that have solar panels. And the time will likely be from noon to 2 or 2:30. And if anyone out there is interested in having other villages participate, contact me, let me know. And then one other thing, Foundation 46 had a meeting last week, and a major theme of discussion there was getting the word out, who they are, what they do. And so some of the things that they're planning this year have to do with raising community awareness. A fun scavenger hunt at each school, go-kart races, and working on a new major saver type of card. So look for information coming your way. Thanks.
Okay. And we're now up to you.
Am I you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just checking.
I looked you in the eye.
Oh, you did. And we're closer together now,
Yes.
right, in our new room. So, yes, school is about to start, and today's superintendent's report is all about that. We definitely appreciate your thanks, and I will share that we are really excited. We all know that the last couple of years were years of significant change. And this time of year, last year, and this time of year, the year prior, there was a lot of nervousness because really nobody knew what it was going to feel like. This year, hopefully people are not experiencing that level of nervousness because mostly what it's going to feel like is school. And we're really excited about that. I'll be talking more about that in a little bit, but I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Amy, to talk about Institute Days and new staff orientation. Please take it away, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Mrs. Gluck.
Thanks. So I'll start with Institute Days. They are coming up on Monday and Tuesday. We are super excited to get everyone back, and I'm really excited just to really meet everybody and see everybody in person. So we have a lot planned on Monday and Tuesday. On Monday, we're going to start with staff reporting in their own buildings. During that time, they will see a pre-recorded message. Some of that is going to be from you, from the board, from Dr. Glickman, from the foundation, and both unions will have a welcoming message as well. Then staff are going to be receiving some training on their new BenQ panels in their buildings that will be facilitated by the info specialists so that everyone will be ready to roll when their students walk into their classrooms. And then the remainder of the morning will be for teachers to be meeting in their job-alike teams. And start digging into the work for this school year. The afternoon is especially exciting. We will have our keynote, so I guess it's flipped from typical years.
Yes, correct.
So we will have our keynote at Park Campus, so everyone will report over there. And we have Dr. Doug Bolton coming to join us, and he is going to be speaking with us about the mental health lessons that were learned from COVID. And really starting to have some of those conversations. The great thing about Dr. Bolton is that we just had the opportunity as a leadership team to work with him, and he really is a dynamic speaker, but also gets us engaged in truly thinking about how are we going to support our students, but also how are we going to support ourselves and the staff. And so thinking about what are the lessons that we've learned, and we're excited to have some conversations about that. He will be providing some follow-up sessions throughout the school year, too, that we'll be able to work with him. And then on Tuesdays, really for staff to be able to be in their buildings, have some building meetings, and have some time in their teams and in their classrooms. So we're excited about Institute Day. Questions about that before I go on to new staff? All right. So we had new staff orientation in this room. It was packed yesterday and today. We had just over 40 teachers in here. So imagine this room with a lot more people. And it was great. They were so excited to be here. They were participating. They had an opportunity to meet all of our district office staff, all of the building leaders, engage in some really dynamic conversations about our scope and sequence documents and our assessments, to have some conversations also about what does professional learning mean in our district and what do professional learning communities mean in our district, and just have some time together meeting each other and then really working with us. They also had some time in their buildings. This afternoon, the multilingual department and the student services department also had some time with Mrs. Lorenzo and with Dr. Diaz, so we were able to be able to provide them some specific support in their areas. So we were getting incredible feedback the whole time, so people were excited to be here, and we're excited to see all of these amazing teachers in their classrooms soon with students.
Thanks so much. All right, that's a perfect segue into speaking briefly about staffing. So Mrs. Gluck already spoke about the 40-plus new teachers that we've brought on board. It has been a very, very busy hiring season all year long. I will share that our administrative team has just been at the grindstone, interviewing people and bringing them aboard. We continue to work on filling the remaining vacant positions, but the building principals have been working very hard to rearrange staff as needed to ensure that certified positions are all covered. We are still in need of several program assistants across the district, along with other positions as well, other classified positions. So if anybody knows folks who are interested in working in schools, perhaps just want to get their feet wet, getting used to what it might be like to work with children, please have them apply, get in touch with us, get in touch with principals. We'd love to talk with them. And now I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Wildman. He's got a few things to talk with us about.
Thank you. I've got two things to talk about. Yesterday, Adam Halper and myself attended the Lake County Safety Meeting in Vernon Hills, Illinois. It was an informative meeting of presentations for members of the Lake County Sheriff's Office, the Lake County Emergency Management Agency, and the Lake County State's Attorney Office. It was a great opportunity to network with these local government partners and first responders. We then had a presentation from the Lake County Treasurer's Office about cybersecurity threats. The next Lake County Safety Meeting will be held on November 9th. One quick reminder, the district is implementing ALICE as our active shooter methodology, and all of our staff will be undergoing ALICE training as part of the district's Institute Day on October 7th. And the district will be having all our building drills completed within the first 90 days using ALICE. I've just liaised today, and we talked about our biggest takeaway from the meeting, and we kind of both agreed it was the importance of building a culture of safety and security in our buildings. So how do we do that? We do it through empowering our staff, through training and building trust and relationships, and we feel that we are doing that with ALICE.
Before you move on, I just want to see if any board members have questions for you about that. Okay.
So my second update is on the bus driver shortage. I'd like to give an update on the national bus driver shortage that we are facing here at CCSD 46. This is a continuation of what we have been discussing as a board and with the community for the last 2 years. At the start and throughout the global pandemic, many bus drivers retired and did not return to work. Replacing these drivers has been difficult throughout the state and the nation. We are not alone in this issue. Getting a non-CDL licensed driver through the entire training process can take up to 8 weeks. Durham has a pipeline of 16 driver applicants, with several of these assigned to CCSD 46, and several of them as well to assign to our partners at District 127. I've been working with Durham this week, and we'll be having a meeting on Friday to assess the status of the routes for our opening day. Possible solutions will include the consolidation of routes. Following that meeting, a communication will be sent out to all families on Friday in both English and Spanish. We are committed to working with our families so that they can make the best solutions for our students. Durham has repeatedly stated their commitment to aggressively and continually hire drivers to build staffing capacity and fully staff our routes.
And that's the end of the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Next, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, and just as a reminder, that includes the personnel addendum we got today.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye. Next is an action item. It's a motion to approve the Durham Transportation Renewal update. Chris, you want to give us an update on that?
I will. Okay, this evening, the administration is bringing a recommendation to approve a new contract with Durham School Services for the 2022-23 and 23-24 school years. Our district renewed our contracts with Durham School Services for these 2 years on January 12, 2022, and on February 2nd, 2022, regular board meetings. These increases were 8.5% for the fiscal year 22-23 and 7.25% for fiscal year 23-24, respectively. As I already just discussed in the superintendent's report, the marketplace for school bus drivers is very competitive based on a driver shortage. Starting pay ranges from $25 to $30 in neighboring school districts and rival bus providers. The hourly rate for this year was scheduled to be $24 per hour. Grayslake High School District 127 has increased driver pay to $27 to remain competitive, to attract new drivers, as well as attract new drivers and retain existing staff. The administration is recommending that CCSD follow this contractual change. The renewal as presented will replace the rate from 8.5% to 13.5% for this school year and replace the rate for fiscal year 23-24 from 7.25 to 5.25. The memo in your packet also highlights several other driver retention initiatives, including sign-on bonuses and retention bonuses.
Does anybody have any questions? Chris?
I have a number. Chris, I'm trying to make decisions through the triple bottom line. So I have questions about social impact of this contract, about the environmental impact, and about the financial impact. So forgive me for taking some time here. I'm curious about the lay of the land right now. What does our ridership look like? Are our buses filled on each of the routes? And then how many of our students are eligible for transportation? What's the in terms of proximity to school, what is the radius that we follow?
Okay, I'll take ridership first. Okay, anecdotally, I can tell you that last year our buses were all filled at the end of the school year, meaning that everyone who was opted for transportation was taking it.
Okay.
So I just want to everyone to understand that we are adding 4 routes this year. So take what we had last year and add 4 additional routes to it, because we are adding routes for our changes to the one-way Spanish immersion program changes that we're making as a school system. So we are asking our partners over there to add more routes. So that's the first thing I want you to understand. As we open school, we will be able to bring you updated ridership, because with those program changes, that the ridership that we have from last year is not really relevant to us, because we're going to have different kids on those routes.
Okay.
In terms of proximity to school, students are eligible for transportation based on board policy, which is more than 1.5 miles from their home school. Students less than 1.5% who have proximity to a safety hazard are also provided transportation. And our list of safety hazards was board approved last month on July 13th.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 1.5 miles is the... Okay.
1.5 miles.
Okay, so in terms of the environmental impact, I'm curious, and I don't know if you'll know the answer to this. I can ask it later when we hear from you. But I'm curious if, I appreciated the EV report, and I'm also wondering if Durham has pursued any retrofitting to its older buses or any other strategies to reduce emissions. I'm more and more concerned about the impact
Do you
of
want to take
diesel
that up there for us?
on our kids.
This is Rick Klaus from Durham School Services.
Not yet.
Okay, there we go. I'm Rick Klaus. I'm Senior Vice President of Operations for National Express and Durham School Services here in the Midwest. I have about 6 states. To answer your question about the environmental impact, in 2010, the United States changed the emission requirements for school buses and other, like trucks and vehicles like that. And so they're known as clean diesel. And that involved diesel particulate traps, and we now have DEF fluid that we put in the buses. So I don't know, I was thinking about this question on the way up here. I can't remember the last time I saw a truck or one of my school buses billowing black smoke out of the exhaust pipes. Like, we see it all the time. I can't remember the last time I've seen that. And that's because in 2010, the regulations changed and requires these diesel particulate traps. So they're way cleaner than they used to be. There really aren't a lot of options to upgrade those fleets because the manufacturers are really moving towards other zero emission and clean energy type of solutions, whether that's propane or electric, which I will be talking about in a little bit. So did that answer your question?
It's a start, thank you. It gave me some more to read. I'm just going to move to the financial then, so thank you. In terms of fee structure, do we ask our parents to pay an additional fee for transportation? Is that a strategy we've ever used, or are we using it now?
With the vast majority of students who are traveling either 1.5 miles or having a safety hazard, there's only a very small amount of students and parents who actually pay that fee. So there is a small fee, but correct, we don't actually charge it because of those 2 reasons.
Can I just jump into, just to clarify for a moment? So tell me if I have this right, Chris. Almost all of our students do not pay a fee because they have a right to the free bus. We also
Correct.
offer busing to families that don't have free busing available to them, and they can choose to take the bus if they pay a fee. And there are very few families that take advantage. Is that what you said?
That's correct.
Okay.
And is that a state requirement that we have to offer free, or is that a district choice? Do you know?
Yes. 1.5 miles is the limit. We have to provide busing in Illinois to all students that live 1.5 miles or more compared to walking, not as the crow flies, all right? And unless there's a hazardous route, which Chris mentioned, right? So if there's a hazardous route, then you have to provide busing and has to be approved, and you can't charge a fee for that free busing.
I'll also add in, having just approved our transportation claim for this year, that there are school districts where there's public transportation available to students, in which case then the school district might not be providing that free busing, but that's not our situation, so it doesn't really have any bearing here.
Okay, last one. In terms of our total operating budget, how
Yes.
much are we, what percentage of that budget is spent on transportation? And does that come, if we approve a rate increase, does that take money away from the building deferred maintenance that we've committed to doing in the next few years?
So I approached this as giving you what we spend on Fund 40, which is transportation, over the total operating budget. And I'm not going to go into the numbers, but I can give you the percentages. In 2020, we spent 5.4% of our operating budget on transportation. In the following year, in fiscal year 21, it was 6.23. And last year, for the year that's just closed, through June 30th of 2022, it was 7.32. So we've gone from 5.5, 6.23 to 7.32, and that is driven pretty much by the largest contract of the transportation fund, which is our contract with Durham.
Okay, thank you. And does that mean, is that, and this is just finance basics, I know, for schools, but does that come out of the same, are we going to be using the working cash bonds and diverting money away from building maintenance to cover this if we approve it?
No.
No.
So this
Okay.
would come from the district's levy, which is approved in November, and we are able to levy on a fund basis. So if the district needs more funding in its transportation fund, we would reduce our education fund request and put more money into Fund 40 into transportation. But it has absolutely nothing to do with what we've just approved for the working cash bonds.
Can I, so just to clarify, if we're taking it out of education, then we're prioritizing transportation over curriculum and instruction, over teacher salaries, and over other instructional fees. Is that correct?
We are adequately budgeting to get our kids to school because the transportation fund's aim is to adequately get our students to school.
I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just asking for clarification. Does that money then mean, when we say yes to the transportation, are we then cutting back on what happens in the classroom?
No, we're not. The money would come from a reduction in the education fund.
But it would come out of whatever reserves are in the education fund. It won't.
Correct.
It won't cut back what we're actually doing instruction-wise. It'll just dip into the reserve fund of the fund balance. So because we're increasing it this year, it's not gonna pull resources from this year or next year. It's just gonna, it'll limit up the long-term resources in the long-term budget. Right now, short-term, it won't affect the classrooms itself.
And the timeliness of Dr. Glickman, what she just mentioned, we do get specific state reimbursement for this, but it is a year lag. So we take the expenditures from the previous year, we show the state what we spent on regular and special education transportation, and then they give us a reimbursement based on a proration of that number. So the more we spend on student transportation, both regular and special, increases that reimbursement. So that is an offset. The state has deliberately done that for the last 20 years to help school districts with what is a larger expenditure to make sure that we can get our kids to school. So in terms of the levy, that's the main 60% of our budget. That would be the main answer, but hopefully that state reimbursement will cover that increase.
Thank you very much.
Jessica?
Yeah, I have to say, this is so complicated. I mean, it's not just a simple decision. That's why I've struggled with this all day. Because I worry about like the optics, like people who aren't watching the meeting, who drive down the street and see $27 per hour for bus drivers, even though it's not apples to apples. They work different hours, different numbers of hours. So, and then I question, yeah, what are we putting our dollars towards? What do we value the most? So I just struggle with this, and those are my comments. I don't really have questions, I guess.
If you think about it, getting the kids to school in the first place it was, a big equity issue at a point in time. And so just getting the kids who can't get dropped off, whose parents both work from 6 in the morning, that's how I look at that issue. I mean, it's important to get the kids to school to teach them, right? Mm-hmm. I do agree with you. You see that sign that's out at Prairie View, and it seemed like it was like the wheel on The Price is Right. Over a 4-month period last year, it just seemed like it just kept rolling. That 2 was followed by a bigger number, like every couple of weeks. But that's a function of the marketplace that we're in right now. And the converse to doing this is having the bus problems we had at the beginning of last year, is having kids missing hours of schooling because the bus is 45 minutes late. So, yeah, it's a tough situation, and it's not a good one to be in. Chris, I did want to ask you about the categorical reimbursement. What approximately do we get reimbursed? What percentage? It's a fairly low one, is it not?
I don't recall exactly what it is. Maybe, call a friend.
No,
He knows.
The answer man's creeping up.
I'm sorry, I promised Chris I wouldn't talk during this section, but generally speaking, special needs is reimbursed at about 80%. So that's tremendous reimbursement from the state. Regular ed varies, in every school business official I talk to, you get a different number because there's different mileage and ridership and stuff like that, but it could be in the 20% range. So it's way less on the regular ed, which is the bulk of the busing that you have. So there is a little bit of an offset. And then this year, the state increased the reimbursement by 8.5%, which was unusual. You know, normally they give you 2-3% a year, and the costs go up higher than that, and you're going backwards. This year, at least the legislature stepped up a little bit and gave us all 8.5%.
Thank you for that last piece, because I was going to ask that, you know, part of what's driving these increases is, well, first of all, the unusual circumstance of the pandemic and people retirees not wanting to be on a bus. And then, you know, we've been hit with unprecedented inflation, which is driving fuel cost increases. And so to know that the legislature has increased the percentage of the reimbursement is also a good data point to have. Thank you.
And just for perspective, it is hard to see $27 when, you know, if you were to work full-time, you're getting up there to a lot of elementary school teachers, right? But they work 4 hours a day, so they're making maybe $20,000 a year, and that's part of the problem. They don't get health care benefits, right? And we have a 401k, which is great, but they don't get a pension. So that's really the gist of the problem, is that, you know, 2 years ago we were at $20 an hour, and retail was at 10. Now you can work at McDonald's for $15, right? And as that closed the gap, it's pushed up, you know, where we need to be to get people into the driver's seat, because the minimum wage keeps going up and everybody's fighting for the same people, and it just is pushing it up. So I like your analogy of the wheel, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, that second number after the 2 was a different color even. It was a temporary number system.
Stephen, you have anything? I don't. What was the increase, the dollar amount? I thought I saw it in there at one point, but I don't see it now.
It's 50,000.
Okay, so doing the back of the napkin math, right, which I'm more famous for now than I want to be.
Yes.
So 20% of that covers about 10 grand. If you add special ed, maybe we're going to get about $13,000 back out of that 50. So you're looking at overall somewhere about $37,000 in additional expense in order to provide, as Jason said, the equity of getting our students to school. So I don't necessarily want them on the bus for a long period of time, because that takes away from the rest of their day.
And one more thing, District 127 has already approved this.
It's part of the reason why we're in the spot we're in.
Well, right, because the point being that we compete for the same drivers. And so we don't want Durham to be in a position where they have drivers that will work for 127 but not work for us. Yeah.
Any other questions we have regarding this? Or?
Just one more comment. So the back of the napkin math that you just did, on one hand, it doesn't sound like a budget buster. On the other hand, it sounds like a teacher.
Yes.
Right. So that puts a little bit more perspective on it. I guess I see the need to do this, but I just would continue to ask that you keep looking for ways to rationalize the expense as it relates to routes or any other way that you can to minimize the impact of this. But I'm generally in support of it.
Yeah, the only other comment I have is I'd prefer not to get blindsided by this, like we did with it. I know you talked to me offline, but to get blindsided by District 127 increase in theirs, and we kind of getting more or less held over a barrel in order to be able to compete with drivers, it kind of stings a little bit. So, well, a little more communication between at least our two districts and you guys when something like this is going on. When something like this is going on would be very helpful for the rest of the board, because this is going to sting a little bit.
I have one more comment before you vote. And please know I am deeply in support of this renewal, not that I'm a voting member of the board, but we've talked so much about the importance of getting children to school on time. And I feel like we're at this very unusual moment in time because, as Chris has talked about, there is a bus driver shortage. And so even with this increase, I don't know that at this time that Durham is able to make a commitment to us that they will be able to fill every spot. And we could still be in the position of needing to double up routes. And I'm only saying that because we're only a week away from school. And I wouldn't want anyone to say, hey, the board just approved an increase and now look, the buses are still late. That could happen. That could happen. But it's a measure towards improving things in the long run.
Do we have any idea? Oh, I'm sorry, Jess, go ahead. Do we have any sense of whether we'll be asked again during this school year to increase rates? And I know you can't predict the future, but is this a step in a larger plan, or will this be sufficient for the rest of the year?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with the economy and if there's a recession. You know, if unemployment remains the way it is, we don't know where this will end. And our strategy isn't to lead, just like I'm sure you are with teachers. You don't pay more, for teachers than all the districts around you. You want to be in the middle of the market, and you don't want to lead at the top. And that's always been our strategy. We're reacting to what competitors and in-house operations are doing around us. So we don't really know what it's going to look like 6 months or a year from now. I spoke to the board in October, and we did a little temporary incentive thing that you all supported, and we said we needed to buy 90 days to see if the market would get better, if there was another variant. So things are definitely picking up. Since we've been advertising a new rate, I think Kevin has maybe 30 drivers at some point in the pipeline, whereas a year ago we had maybe 4 or 5. So we are seeing more people coming in and applying, but it really, I think it's a matter of the market and the economy. If there's a recession and unemployment doubles, we're going to have all the bus drivers we need. If it stays at 3.5%, and wages keep going up, then we'll follow the market and we'll share what that is. When we talk to Chris, we give him all the ads from surrounding areas and what everybody's paying, a chart, and compare, and then pick where we want to be. So I don't know if I have a crystal ball on unemployment and a recession, but I can tell you at our company we'd love to have a recession right now to be able to have enough drivers, but that means, the rest of the economy is not doing so well.
Thank you.
Jessica?
So the statement about safety hazards, students less than 1.5 miles who have proximity to safety hazards are also provided transportation. How many of our spots have crossing guards, those safety hazard spots? Because I think in some of the neighborhoods, there would be people wanting to walk to school, but it's just it doesn't feel safe to do so.
They were approved last month. I'd have to
Yeah.
check the resolution. I don't remember.
I don't remember us talking about crossing guards, though, and is that something that's now done through the police department, or how is it done? Or is that something for another day?
technically, it's the municipality's responsibility to manage crossing guards. Lots of school districts have inherited that. And so it's not an easy question for me to answer for you in terms of who that responsibility lies with. It would take a bit of a conversation with Grays Lake to determine the responsibility of who would take on, hire, and administer those crossing guards.
All right,
And
thanks
that's
for
hire if they
answering.
can, right?
And we
That's
have
hire if they can,
if they can, right?
right? Because that's,
And
We
we
have
have
statutory.
posted crossing guards as well.
right.
So, and I don't think we filled them yet.
Okay, are we, can I have a motion to approve the contract?
Jim, can I ask one more question before we do? Thank you. Can I ask you, so in my book, Essentials for Illinois Finance, it says that we've had a bus driver shortage pre-pandemic, and that one of the strategies has been to increase bus driver salary. So I'm curious, in the years pre-pandemic and now, and through now, is this strategy working, and is it working for this district? Because it seems to me that if we increase our salaries, then neighboring more affluent districts will just increase theirs, and then we're in this continual cycle. And at this point, I'm concerned about our fund balance.
That's why I mentioned that what our pipeline looks like right now, where we have so many applicants and people going through the system that we didn't have before. So it's definitely improving, but it was tough pre-pandemic. But we had enough drivers here in Grays Lake. It was one of our locations that was never experiencing a bus driver shortage, unless you go back to like 2005. So we were doing really well pre-pandemic here, and then that really set us back. It seems to be working, but you are also correct that there's an arms war going on here, and it just takes another district or two around to get short drivers, have some retirements, somebody goes out on medical, and they up the ante. And, all we can do is keep communicating and letting you know what's happening out there and where it is. In the past, bus drivers would get maybe 2%, 3% increase a year. And then pre-pandemic, when it started to get pretty tight, went up to about 5% a year. But this year, right, we were scheduled to go to 24, and we're at 27. That's extremely unusual in our business. I mean, we're used to 2-3% wage increases.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve the transportation renewal update.
Second.
Weedman,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And we are up to unfinished business, which will be the safe return to in-person instruction and community and learning plan.
I have to tell you, we had to think about whether we were going to put this in new business or unfinished business, right? But talking about the pandemic certainly feels like unfinished business. So tonight I'm here to share with you this is a mouthful, safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of learning plan. I would never, ever name something that way, but the federal government did, so there you have it. All right, and we always like to begin with our mission, empowering learners, creating equity, and cultivating community. And as I put this together for you tonight, I was really thinking through the lens of empowering learners, because so much of what we are doing is going back to focusing on learning in schools and doing much less focusing on, as I heard someone just say, thinking about how far apart we're sitting from each other. That stated, we know it's a balance, right? We acknowledge the importance of balancing the interests of returning our procedures to pre-COVID conditions as much as possible, but also keeping some strategies in place to help keep our students, staff, and families as healthy as possible. So we do both. And of course, we have guidance. I am not going to click every one of those links or actually any of those links for you, but they're all available. This is all the guidance that we receive through the CDC, through our state government, through the federal government. It's all there for you. It's also embedded in the plan, which, by the way, will be available online on our website as of tomorrow. What you're going to find as I talk through these slides is that the mitigation strategies that I'm going to be talking with you about are all going to be familiar. They're things that we were doing last spring, minus a lot of other things that we were doing last spring. So we'll start with masking. Masking continues to be optional, as it was last spring, except for in a few situations. So as we know, individuals who have tested positive for COVID need to isolate for at least 5 days. There's some more caveats related to that, but if they are able to return on days 6 to 10, they have to mask. They have to mask when they're in health offices, and that has to do with the requirements that are given to us. Any individuals who display symptoms of COVID-19 and are getting ready to go home, they need to mask while they're waiting to go home. And then in the event that it is determined that there's been an outbreak, and we work with our health department, our local health department, to identify that, we could end up having targeted mask implementation. So that could mean that, for example, for a period of time, one school in our school district could have to mask while the other schools didn't, if there seemed to be if there was an outbreak identified at that school. The last thing I want to mention about masking is it is a choice, which means we also need to respect the choice that people have to wear masks. And so we ask all of our staff and all of our students to be very respectful that there will be people wearing masks on a daily basis. Let's talk about cleaning. Boy, did we talk about cleaning for the last 2 years. We learned quite a lot, and at this point, it's whittled down to these few statements. We will continue to use the sprayers and disinfectants that meet current recommendations to eradicate illness in our schools. The high touch points will continue to be cleaned once a day. And we also know we did a lot over the last few years regarding indoor air quality assessments. We had those assessments back last fall. That resulted in upgrades in air filtration, and there are ongoing upgrades to building automation to improve indoor air quality on an ongoing basis. Shield testing is the one area that will be very different this year than it was last spring. And I'm going to start by saying you may have heard that there are many school districts who are choosing not to do shield testing at all this year. I know there was a report in the Tribune just a few days ago. And some school districts have made that decision because there are so many different opportunities for people to get tested outside of school systems, right? You can go so many places locally, and many people have taken advantage of the free test at-home kits that they're able to get. That stated, our school district is really glad that shield testing continues to be offered for free from our state, and we wanted to take advantage of it. The change that we made, however, is we will no longer be doing that testing on site. Instead, we're doing what's called unobserved testing, which means that families that want to will have children bring tests home every week. The children will take the tests at home with their families, send them on back, and they will be then sent out to Shield to be screened. And then just like in the past, we'll be able to then get information to parents if a child or a staff members can do it as well, if a staff member also will get the information if they have tested positive for COVID. We are also changing our method for how we're getting consent. Last year, you'll remember we did opt out. So the assumption was that all children were going to be going through the testing unless a family specifically asked to opt out. This year we're doing opt-in. So families should have already gotten the form. We hope that a lot of people will opt in because we really did find it to be quite useful in keeping our schools safe. I also want to mention that as per SHIELD, if a school dips below 50 individuals taking a test, then we'll no longer be able to continue with free SHIELD testing for that school. So again, we are hoping that a lot of people, students and staff, will be taking advantage. I can promise you that I will be. Talk a little bit about close contacts. As we know, vaccinated individuals are not considered to be close contacts. Schools will send home letters alerting families if there's a COVID case in a classroom or by a team at the middle school level, and alerts will only provide when there's a confirmed case. So we don't send home letters when somebody's just gone home sick with symptoms. We wait until there's a confirmed case. And close contacts are not excluded from school unless they become symptomatic. So that too is how we ended the school year last year. Instruction for students who are, whoops, we went back one, there we go. Instruction for students who are at home because they're in isolation will be provided through a remote tutor. That's what we did last year as well, and that's how we're going to start the year. So a remote tutor will be provided for students who are in isolation due to a confirmed case, or for families who choose to quarantine due to exposure. Again, quarantining due to exposure is not required, but a family might choose to keep a child home if they've been exposed, and in that case as well, we will provide the remote tutor. And I want to pause for a moment on social emotional needs. It is noted that COVID-19 has certainly taken its toll on the social emotional well-being of our students, our staff, and our families, and we are addressing that in a number of ways. We will be embedding instruction in our regular programming to support our students' social and emotional needs. We provide ongoing professional development for our staff. At the top of our meeting, or earlier in our meeting, Mrs. Gluck talked about Doug Bolton, Dr. Bolton, who will be talking with our staff on Monday afternoon, and that's one of the things he'll be talking about, and he will be working with our staff throughout the year. School social workers are available to provide needed support to students, and I also want to remind everyone that our school district is very proud to connect families to services through a program called Teacher Salaries. It's a complimentary and confidential mental health coordination service. So we've provided information for folks in the past about how to get in touch with them. It's stated there on the slide and in the plan as well. That brings me to the end of the presentation, bringing this to perhaps, I don't know, maybe a fifth of the amount of talking that I did in presentations at this time last year and 2 years ago. I don't miss those days. I'm guessing other people don't as well, but I would like to know if the board has any questions about this plan.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I mentioned this to you earlier, Lynn, but I'm thrilled that Dr. Bolton is going to be part of the resource here in the district. He works with us in the district where I teach, and it's been an invaluable resource for staff and faculty. He also is incredibly peaceful in the way that he speaks, which I think informs the way that he brings that resource to bear. So I just wanted to share that I think it's a really great thing that he's coming to this district.
Thank you. We've commented that everybody always feels better when they've spent time with him. It's a gift. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. This plan, again, the slides are available, but the actual written plan will be available on our website tomorrow. It also will be embedded in our student handbook, which will be going out to families after the start of the school year.
Thank you. All right, next we are up to new business, and that is the EPA Clean Bus Program application. I think we're back to you.
Okay, I'm glad to talk about electrification of buses rather than what we talked about before. So this is a very exciting time in our business where we have new technology that's can really make a difference in our lives. So school buses are really the perfect application to be an electric vehicle. Not all school buses, but most of them, because we can charge them in the middle of the day, right? So we have the 2 shifts. Some buses will probably not be a great candidate for electrification because if you have an AM route, a midday, and a PM route, you probably don't have enough time to recharge, and we don't want to run out of juice while we're on the road. And then, of course, the field trip buses, they're going a long way. And I expect that will change over time. Right now, we can do 2 different kinds of electric buses, or 2 different battery packs. One that gives you 120 miles a day and one that gives you 200. But the benefits really are, they're zero emission, right? Which is, you know, clean air is great for all of us out on the road, but most important for the students. There's less maintenance on them, right? Because you don't have an engine, right? So there's no oil, right, to change. They don't have as many moving parts. So the maintenance costs are less. And I got to ride in one last month. They are so quiet, right? And when you think about, I don't know last time you rode a school bus, but it can get ratcheted up, the noise with the kids. They get excited. It's great. They don't have to yell over the noise of the bus and the electric buses. And the heat and the air conditioning works way better than what we see in the diesel buses. So there's really some great opportunities. And then we were talking about the solar earlier, what the communities are doing. The technology is moving to where you can put electricity on the battery packs on the buses. You can also put the power back on the grid, right? So there's really an opportunity over time, we're not there yet, but in the next 10 years where you're going to be able to have solar panels at the schools, in the parking lots, and sort of bring some of your own energy into the buses, and then if you need to, sell it back to the grid. So pretty cool stuff. But it's early right now. Our company in North America, we have about 100 electric buses. Only 9 of them are school buses right now. But let's talk about the grants. If you go to the next slide, please. Right now, there's a lot of press about the Biden administration approving $5 billion for clean grants. So it's not all electric, but mostly, and it's not all school buses. The $5 billion isn't all for buses. It's for trucks and other commercial vehicles. But it's exciting, right? So there's an opportunity for grants right now. There's $500 million available. The applications are due on the 19th of August. Working with Chris, we have we're about to put in an application for District 46 for school bus. And what's great about this grant is it pays the entire cost of the bus and the infrastructure. So it's a free bus. Who wouldn't do it, right? The downside is they're prioritizing rural districts and low-income districts, which you aren't on the priority list. So it's, we're going to apply, we're going to learn from it, but there's a pretty low chance that we're going to get an award because the priority districts will probably eat up all that money because they can get up to 25 literally free buses. Since we're not a priority district, if we were to get one, we would get about $100,000 less than the full grant, but it gets it a lot closer to the cost of a normal school bus. To give you an idea, a school bus or diesel bus right now costs about $100,000. These cost $300, $350, $400, depending on the infrastructure and the battery pack that you buy. So you figure about $350,000 a bus versus $100,000. So for a fleet like yours, I know we were talking about numbers earlier, right, we run 42 regular ed routes for you. So we have about 45, 47 buses. At 100,000, that's $4.5 million in buses. Electric buses would be $13, $14 million. And we don't invoice the district $3 million a year. So it's very capital intensive. And what we're waiting for is for our country to get to the point where it's a no-brainer to buy zero-emission buses, because it is in the UK. And some of the information I have here is about our company in other parts of the world. It's the overall cost of an electric bus in the UK is the same as a diesel bus, right? Because the diesel buses are a lot more expensive, and the manufacturers are cranking out a ton of electric vehicles in Europe. The great news for us here in Illinois is that one of the manufacturers is headquartered here, Navistar Corporation. They build international trucks, they build international school buses. They're headquartered here. And Lion Electric, the other big manufacturer of electric buses, is building a brand new electric school bus manufacturing plant in Joliet. So what our strategy is as a company is we're trying to get a deal with them where we commit to a big number of buses to get the price per unit down. Those negotiations aren't done yet, but we're really trying to get to that point where we get the price per unit down, where the maintenance cost savings offset a diesel bus to make it a no-brainer, to have it cost neutral to buy them. We're probably 5 years away from that, something like that. And then you have about a 10-year span where all the buses you already bought that are diesel age out and get replaced. So we're probably, 2035, 2040 before you'll see all, the whole country, all the school buses will be electric. But we're not there yet. Right now, and I've got some information here on the last slide, if you just jump forward to the last slide, the next one. A little bit about the market. Right now, there's about 12,000 electric buses on order, which is about 2% of the school buses in America. So it's early. It's kind of like the Betamax time for those of you that are old enough like me to remember that. So early adoption can be a risk. Our biggest concern right now, there's two concerns. The cost of lithium is going up, right? Ford announced this morning they're raising the price of an F-150 by $7,000 because of the cost of lithium. And the grid is a little bit iffy. We're hoping that the more electric vehicles are out there, the better it is for the grid, because there'll be solar power, pushing a lot of that energy down to the fleet. And then the last one is, we don't really know if the battery packs, we normally run a bus for about 12 years, a diesel school bus. Right now, we think the battery pack's gonna have to be replaced after 8 years, which is another $85,000. With a diesel, you don't have to replace the engine. And if you did, it would be a fraction of that cost. So again, it's a little bit early in the market. We're trying to figure out what the costs are going to be over the life cycle of the vehicle. But exciting, right? Because they're quiet, they're clean, there's better air, the kids are going to love them, it's just a matter of having the money kind of work out to where the manufacturers make enough of them here to get the price per unit down to where it's a no-brainer. So we'll see. We've got an application going in. The awards will be made in October by lottery, first with the priority districts, and if they haven't sucked up that $500 million nationally, then it's a lottery for anybody else that applied. So we won't know where that stands for a couple months. Any questions about EV?
So, you mentioned you're gonna put in a grant on District 46's behalf. What is your ask, and what would that cover as far as how many buses?
Actually, We can't apply, either the district can apply or a manufacturer can
Okay.
apply. So we decided we have the manufacturer apply, and then they would, when we buy the bus, they'll just give us the credit. So it's kind of a roundabout way of doing it. We put in for one bus. And then at the bus parking plate, wherever they park, right, at the bus terminal, like you see those Tesla chargers out there, every bus has to have one of those units in front of it. So it's about 20 or 30 grand a bus infrastructure to have the power source there. But that's in that 350,000 I talked about.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I just have a comment, not a question. Thank you for applying, because I think it sends a nice message to the youth who are concerned about our world. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks to the administration for pushing that forward.
I want to echo, yeah, thank you. Thank you for moving this forward. And then just future thinking, I'm wondering if you've thought about how as you transition to EV buses, my understanding is the federal government has prioritized priority districts. Therefore, those kids who are least resourced will have the first access to electric buses. As Durham transfers their fleet, will you follow that model, or will you follow a different model in terms of prioritizing which districts have access to the buses and which ones are the ones that will be the last to use the diesel buses?
Great question. I think we will transition based on the grants available, because it's really a commercial application for us, right? I mean, our contracts in Illinois can't be more than 3 years long at the beginning, and then you can go year to year to year. You don't spend $15 million on a new fleet on a one-year contract, right? So it's really, for us to move the entire fleet over, the commercial proposition has to be there so we can give you value for your money and not dig into your education fund, right, by buying way more expensive buses, right? We have to keep our costs down. So it will happen. We will do it in mass once that economic equation makes it a no-brainer. Then there will be districts that will want it earlier, or they might want 1 or 2 or 5, and districts can fund that, and we'll work with whoever wants to do that. But really, for the next few years, it's going to be based on the grants, because they're just so much more money. You know, I don't know anybody that's buying them without government funding right now. So we will not do it based on rural or needy districts first.
Thank you.
And I actually did have I want to thank you as well for moving it forward, but I wanted to build off of Mrs. Albert's comment. I'd like to see us be able to share that story in our narrative around the community, right? Like even if we don't get the grant or whatever the case may be, maybe there's some way via social media or on our platforms beyond just, a board meeting where we sometimes have a lot of people and sometimes only a couple. Maybe make sure to share that we know that we're moving these things forward. So the youth of our community see that, they came here to do a presentation and things are moving forward as best as we can.
I want to piggyback off that and think about EdRed too, and wondering if that's an avenue that we want to intentionally, I guess it's think about so that we can encourage those grants.
I can see field trips down to Joliet to see the factory.
Count me in.
If you've got a bunch you want to take down there, we'll take them down there.
I'll come. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're up to topics for future agenda items.
Our next regular board meeting is September 7th, but prior to September 7th, we expect to be scheduling a special board meeting for the purpose of approving contracts. We will be waiting until we have both the PSRP and GTU bargaining agreements ratified, and then we'll be talking about when to schedule a special board meeting for those contract approvals. September 7th, we'll start with a finance committee meeting at 5:30, correct? At 6:30, we have a budget hearing, correct, Mr. Wildman? Okay, before I go any further on the 7th, can you talk a little bit about the budget hearing and then any other budget-related topics that we have to have over the next month? So there'll be a budget hearing and then approval?
It's that night.
The same night?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted
Yep.
to make sure.
Approval
Budget
that
hearing
night,
that
yes.
night and budget, okay. What I meant to say was, budget hearing and budget approval on the 7th. All right. That evening, we also will be bringing Arbor Food Service to the board for an update on our food service program. And Mr. Halperin will be providing an update, or a report rather, on summer buildings and grounds work. We're looking forward to that, and there'll be photos, right? Looking forward to those photos. So that's on the 7th. And then just two other dates I want to mention moving forward. I'm winding up into October for a moment. October 12th, we're planning on a presentation about standardized testing, so Ms. Gluck will be working on that. And then board, this is the first time you're hearing this from me, but I haven't gotten feedback from all of you. November 9th will be a special board meeting for our board workshop. So you may remember we were narrowing it down, and we have it, the 9th. And so I think today I sent that date to Laura Diaz. And that's what I meant, Laura Martinez. I'm thinking, Laura Diaz, yes? Yes, sorry. Not Laura Diaz, Laura Martinez. And that's what we have for future meetings.
Okay. Any public comments? Okay, then we have a closed session.
We do.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to move into closed session.
I'll second it.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye. All right, and we do not expect any action to come out of this, so we'll be adjourning shortly afterwards. So there's no need for anybody to stick around if you don't